Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Hey friend, Esther here, and I'm excited to bring you today's conversation with Rachel Pellegrino. Rachel is the founder of Little Lamb Books, a Christian publishing company that she founded a few years ago. Listen in to today's conversation as Rachel and I chat about what it looks like to step out of your comfort zone and start a business from the ground up. She shares how she was able to come to this decision to take the big step, and she is also sharing some advice for those of you who might have a book idea in your heart. Rachel and I also discuss what it looks like to hold on to confidence even when God is calling you into a new or different season. We've been talking about confidence on the podcast over the past couple of weeks. In episodes 67 and 68, if you haven't listened yet, I recommend you go back and listen to those. But I felt like this was the perfect time to bring you this conversation and show you a real life example of what it can look like to take action, step out of your comfort zone, and hold on to confidence even when the path is not 100% clear. So I know you're going to love this conversation. For the show notes and the links to everything that we talk about, including Rachel's website and social media, head over to my website, estherlittlefield.com/episode 69. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our conversation with Rachel. Welcome, Rachel, to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Awesome. So Rachel, I shared a little bit about you in the intro, but why don't we start with you just telling us how you are currently leading in your life right now?
I am the owner and publisher of a traditional publishing house. Little Lamb Books publishes faith-based fiction and nonfiction for elementary, middle grade, and young adult readers. So basically, I am the head of the company, and then we delegate out to contractors, and then I also deal with the authors. And so I lead the whole thing, and I wear many, many hats.
Awesome. And how long ago did you start that company?
We started as of recently, and we are on our 4th birthday. So we started in 2015, September 2015. We launched Little Lamb Books, and we celebrate in September our 4th birthday, which is exciting to be a business that actually made it to 4 years and is, is actually producing product. And we, as of now, we have 9 books on the market, and they're all faith-based, clean, entertaining fiction books for kids, except for our Christmas book, which is nonfiction. It's our first nonfiction title. So
awesome. All right. So I would love to go back in time a little bit and just kind of find out about your leadership journey and how you got to where you are now and how you ended up starting this company.
Oh, goodness. I have always been a type A personality. So I have been in leadership roles my entire life, whether that was in high school as a part of student council or, in college leading a group of girls in a Bible study or something like that. But really it started in college. I took on a position as a host of a water park stage show, if you will. They would bring in bands and I would have to host it like, the Jeopardy host. I was there and I was saying all the things. And I think that kind of catapulted me into just always wanting to help run things. I'm a fixer. I am a very strong INFJ. I know exactly where I want things to be and how to plan it. But Little Lamb Books came out of actual grief for me. I lost a pregnancy that was really kind of traumatic. And when that happened, I also kind of lost my desire to know what I was doing. Like I just kind of stopped. And so I had a 2-year-old. I was out of teaching because of what I'd been through. And I took some time off and it really was praying. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I still had other things in my heart. I thought, I'll go write a book, which is where we all kind of start when we think we're going to write a book. Is I'm just going to write this book. But I took a writing class. I took a creative writing class, and that led to a business writing class. And then that led to a business class. And I put together this proposal just for the class. And when I finished the proposal, my business teacher was kind of like, "Oh, that's really cool. You should really do that." And I got done with the class and I sat there staring at this business plan going, maybe I won't go back to teaching. Maybe I will actually do this thing. So I started talking to my husband about it. I started praying about it, and it wouldn't leave me alone because really I could have gone back to teaching, but I didn't really want to. And so I talked my husband into letting me cash out my teacher retirement. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek because, it was like, I didn't want him to think I was just throwing something into a hobby. I really wanted it to be a business, but he didn't really know how to start except with my business plan. And so in September 2015, we had a launch party. We kicked it all off. And I spent the next year really building a foundation for the company. And I went to conferences and I talked to other publishers and kind of sought out whether or not this was a real deal. And there's nothing wrong with hobbies and there's nothing wrong with passion. But when you're talking about an industry that you have to invest, you have to invest a lot of capital. It was a big deal. So we signed our first author in 2016. So a year later, almost to the day, we signed our author. And then a year later from that, we launched our first picture book, which has gone on to win almost 8 national awards as a debut picture book, whether it was for the cover or the illustrations or the content. And so that's really been, I took my leadership skills that I learned in school and all of these different internships and opportunities that I'd had. But really what happened was I taught for so long and I built up confidence in what I knew and who I was. And then I took that leap of faith, and it's been a leap, a pretty big leap, but it's been a really positive and passionate one. I love what I do. So.
That's awesome. So how did you know that it was the right choice to step out of your comfort zone and of the background that you had with teaching into this totally different career? I mean, that's a pretty huge shift in a career.
Just starting a business. Yeah, it's a bold move. I've always been entrepreneurial. I always like to start businesses. I get a ton of ideas. I'll drive through, like, if we go on vacation, I'll drive through one of those really small towns that kind of looks like it needs some revitalization. And I think, a shop should go there and we should put a bakery there. And I imagine what it would be like to kind of bring that back to life. And I think it was bold in that it's a publishing company and I didn't have like a degree in professional publishing or something like that. But I had been an English teacher for 15 years and a journalism teacher for 15 years. And I also, part of my job was to do photography. So all of the pieces, layout and design and writing and the visual aesthetic and all of those things I had experience in for really 15 to 20 years of putting it together. So even though the language was different, the same ideas applied. So in that regard, I felt pretty confident in I can handle this. What has been the learning curve as a leader is juggling the creative side of what you do with the business side and the accounting and all the legal things and finances and, just being the leader, because now you're not just the fun person putting the book together. You're actually I don't have a budget for that thing you want to do. So now we have to find another way. So I think in the boldness of it, it was very ambitious of me. But at the same time, it really was a natural step. And I did feel led. I didn't just take it on a whim. I really kind of went to my family and said, I have this really cool idea. What do you think? And then everybody said, let's sit with this a while. let's take on. And I was okay with that because I didn't want to waste anybody's time. And I didn't want to commit to something that wasn't going to be a positive event. I mean, it's okay to start something and stop, but at the same time, we're talking about cashing out, your retirement account. If I'm going to have faith in my company, then this is what I have to do. And so the leadership part wasn't as scary to me as I don't really want to fail. So how do I make this work? Like, how do I really do this and make it work?
Yeah.
So that I don't look back and go, oh, well, that was a bad idea. So.
Right. Yeah. What role did your faith play in that transition and that decision?
It was huge. Like I said, we were walking through a grief process, and I was struggling with why and how come I couldn't have this baby that I wanted to have, and how come the Lord let this happen. And I was raised in church. My family's always been in church. I have grandparents who are pastors and evangelists, and so it wasn't a question of was God there at the time. It was, okay, I don't understand what you're doing. So now what do I do? And so I had to lean into my faith. I didn't want to take a step that wasn't in God's will. And I do feel like he led me through the classes that I took to kind of tell me, yes, you could write a book and someday maybe you will, but I actually want you to right turn into this and it will impact and build. Like, for me, it was all about building a legacy for my daughter, who was 2 and wouldn't understand what was going on for quite some time. But it was, okay, I'm building a legacy for her. And now I'm impacting her generation for Christ. I felt like that was him telling me to do that. But I did a lot of studying. I spent some time in scripture. I read my Bible devotions. We sought wise counsel. And I don't think you can ever lead well without wise counsel, and that needs to come from your foundation in faith. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't a believer in this situation. But I think probably you could very easily spiral and not know. So I just took some of that questioning and threw it into another purpose and another calling, and allowed whatever was going to walk through that with me to happen. So but if faith is huge, my favorite scripture is Hebrews 11:1. Faith is a substance of things hoped for. And I had a lot of hope that I was trying to hang on to. So, but then it's the evidence of the things unseen. And so everything I couldn't see 3, 4, 5 years down the road, I just had to walk in that faith. So.
I love that. So you mentioned seeking wise counsel. I'd love to know if there have been any particular mentors or people that have just really spoken into you during your leadership journey that have helped you along the way.
That's a tough one for me because I didn't really have a mentor. In my particular industry, it's very competitive. And so when you go to find someone to say, hey, is this a good idea? They're kind of sizing you up. Like, well, if I tell you this, how is this going to impact me? And so I actually had to seek people outside of what we call the Christian book industry at first. I actually went to some general market publishers who weren't children's publishers, who didn't have anything to do with what I was doing. And with them, I sought business counsel, and I asked very pointed questions about how they set up their business, and did they think this was going to thrive, and what would be some of the challenges. And then as far as speaking into my life, I did seek out other faith-based people in our church. Some of those, we have a business, equipping classes at our church. And so I took one of those, and I just kind of allowed them to pray over us. There was one in particular that was a women's business group, and it was really, they called it WILD, which I thought was fun. I don't remember exactly what that stands for, but it was women in business. And so they would draw that out of you. And every week we were praying very specific prayers. So during the initial transition of starting the business, I was seeking counsel, and I tried to put myself in, whether it was a life group or church group or other business opportunities, so that I could find that.
Yeah.
And it's just been within the last probably 6 to 9 months that I've connected with other women in similar positions who have faith, who we are now creating like a mastermind group that we can now speak into each other individually so that it's not so broad. But I definitely recommend it because I know that there have been a lot of times where I wish I could just pick up the phone and say, hey, do this. The other thing I will say is in our school with our daughters, there's a Moms in Prayer group. And Moms in Prayer is a national organization. We have a group that meets. And what has been key in the last year for me is that I can go to them and sit in what we call the hot seat and ask for a very specific prayer. And to have women who are just walking strong in their faith, even with whatever's going on in their lives, to be able to receive that prayer has been inspiring, because then even when you're feeling like I cannot do this another day, they're praying over you and they're texting and saying, how are you doing today? How's this going today? And it's in confidence, but it's in knowledge that they're thinking of you. So that's instrumental as well. And I think for me, that has been really big because it's tied with my daughter's school, but it's in my business. I can say, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm struggling with. And, tell me, guys, am I alone? And if I am, can you pray over me? Pray over me, please. So that's been big.
Yeah, I love that. And we talk a lot on this podcast about the value of being in community with other believers and the wise counsel. I love your point about, really not being able to lead without without receiving some wise counsel along the way. Whenever we try to go out and do this thing on our own, it almost always backfires. So such a good reminder to be doing that.
And it is hard because we're all busy. Everybody's so busy. And so you hate to ask somebody, can you help me? Can you come alongside of me? I struggle with that. But I also am finding now that I'm 4 years into this, I think it might be good to mentor someone else. Like, I feel like I need to start finding avenues to put myself out there so that then it becomes something that I'm giving back to a community that maybe wasn't always there for me, but that I'm finding there for me now. And so I think we have to learn to step out of our comfort zone. And that's always the bigger challenge. So
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of challenges, what are some of the challenges that you have experienced in the transition from being a teacher to being a business owner and kind of having to start building a team and all the things you're doing within your business?
Teaching actually prepared me quite well because of the content areas that I taught. Aside from English language arts, I was actually the only person on my campus a lot of the time who did what I did. I did yearbook and I did journalism and photojournalism. And, we were there long hours taking pictures of campus events and writing stories and interviewing people. And so I spent a lot of time alone with my students who I called my kids. I mean, for many years, they were my children. And so the skills that I learned and the ways that I transitioned, really, I still was alone a lot of the time. And I was able to kind of take that and just take those ideas and put them together. But teaching was huge for me because it was a part of my life from when I left college all the way through. Like, I was single for most of it. And then I got married the last couple of years and then I had a child. And so it was those big life events. But from teaching into publishing, very similar skill sets for leadership, being able to stand in front of a group and express your thoughts, being able to communicate in a professional way. I spent a lot of time teaching my students. You can't just go, hey, teach, tell me what I need to know for this article, or, I need you to stand here for the picture. You have to be able to communicate in a professional way. And I think a lot of those things are here. As a business owner, you deal with a lot of different audiences and a lot of different vendors and authors who are all different personalities, who are now like my kids because I'm taking their dream and trying to make it a reality. And so there's that roller coaster of emotion sometimes And I think the biggest challenge I've had is finding that line in the sand where you say, I can't just be your friend right now. I have to be your boss, or I have to be your business leader, or I have to be the person who tells you no. And you may not like it, and I'm sorry. And I'm not going to get it right. And I'm 100% human and fallible. And so sometimes my decisions may not have the results that you wanted, the intended way that you wanted it. So that for me has been the biggest challenge, because at a school you have that safety net. Somebody else is making big decisions, and you just have to go with the flow and work it out. But in a business, as the leader of the business, you kind of have to say no a lot, and that's not always fun. And people's reactions are not always what you hope they would be or what you would like. But I think for me, that has been hard, because our group is like a family. We're a very big family, and I want that kind of environment. But then there are times when you have to say, I'm sorry, we didn't meet this deadline. So now we have to push this back, and that's disappointing. And I'm sorry, but this is how we have to do this. And not everybody gets excited about that. Not everybody knows all the details and understands it. So you kind of have to walk that fine line. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question exactly how you wanted that.
Oh no. Hey, there's no right or wrong answer. I think that it's the funny thing that you mentioned, just the parallel between teaching and leading a business. The thing that I think maybe is in common is that you kind of had to do the same thing probably with your students, like learning for them to hear you say no, or this isn't satisfactory or whatever. Like, I think a lot of leaders want to be liked and want everybody to, agree with them and just be on board all the time. And that's just not the reality of leadership. And it's probably not the reality of the teaching life either.
No, your students are not always happy to see you.
Right.
So, or to get your comments on their papers or any of those things. So there's a lot of parallels. And I think it's funny how God's sense of humor is that, hey, we're going to do this for this amount of time, and then I'm going to throw you into this, and look at what you've done that you've already done, but it's just, it looks different. So I think it probably prepared me way more than any college class did at the time. So,
yeah. So what are some of the rewards that you've experienced of stepping out of your comfort zone into this new calling that God gave you?
Oh my goodness. It's a mixed bag. When we found out that our debut picture book won its first national award, I cried. And then I had to get up on stage and talk, and I didn't know what to say. I rambled like a fool. And that in and of itself was probably one of the biggest rewards at the time, because we did hear some naysayers. I mean, not everybody agreed with what our philosophy was. The fact that we were faith-based, and at the time, even 4 years ago, it was a challenge. You had a lot of bookstores closing. You had a lot of industry upheaval. And so for someone at a national level in just a general kids category to say your book is tops, I called my entire family. We were on Skype at the time, and I just said, oh my gosh, look. And I was holding the award, and I was just bawling, and that was big. And to have that happen more than once, all 4 of our first books won national awards. All 4 of them. That's almost unheard of in our industry. And so that's been a blessing. Other rewards, meeting new people at trade shows and conferences, getting to step out of my comfort zone and teach things that maybe 4 years ago I thought, who would want to listen to me about this? This is not English language arts. This is somebody's dream that you're trying to help them fulfill. So that's rewarding, because I've made a huge network of associates and friendships and just different people with different ideas from different parts of the country. That's been amazing. And then to see all this hard work actually come together. I have a huge team of people, but when we put a book together and we work out all the issues and edits and revisions, but to hold that book, it's like I wrote it. I sit there and stare at it, and I get so emotional, because all of what we've done to see this come out in the world, and then to get those reviews and that feedback up. I read that to my kids tonight, and I cried. I loved reading this to my class, and they love it, and we want to read it every day. And that's big too. And I think even my authors would probably tell you that, they don't get to see that all the time because they're not here with me. But I feel the same way they do when they get to hold their books. It's just that feeling of euphoria that, oh my, we did this and God is so good because look at what's happening. And so those are those kinds of, it can be a tangible reward, but a lot of times it's just the knowledge that we're impacting a generation for Christ. We are impacting their stories and their lives in a way that a book only can. And so to me, it's a very weighty thing. So I take all those little, we call them God winks, when we win something, that's a wink. That's a God wink. I'll take all those all day. I love those. Those are awesome. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're talking on the publishing side of things. That's what you do. But I know that some of my listeners are probably the type of women who have a book idea or have a dream to someday be the one sitting there holding her book, myself included. So, tell us, do you have any advice for that woman who is kind of thinking about the idea of getting published someday? Like, just kind of how does she get started? What should she do?
Well, there's two sides to this. So there's the creative side. When you have an idea, write it down, right? We say that to everybody, including moms, especially, who, I don't know about y'all, but I have pads of paper everywhere, legal pads and Post-it notes. But every time something strikes me, whether it's on my phone or I write it down, because 5 minutes later, I'm not going to remember it anyway. So on the creative side, it's put your manuscript together. And every time you have an idea, write it down, because you never know what that may become later. And so when you have an idea, put it together, but then start reading what you want to write. And a lot of times you'll think, oh, there's 20 books out there already that way. And I used to think the same thing. I'm like, well, we don't need another book about that. But 5 years later, somebody new is going to be looking for what you have to offer. 2 months later, somebody's going to look at what's available and go, that's not quite what I'm looking for. And so learn the industry, learn what's out there. What is your competition? What we call comparable titles to your idea, and read them and figure out what your voice is, because your voice is unique. So what's the imprint you're going to put on that? What's the stamp of yourself that's going to come out in your idea? But research it. And then on the business side, you need to learn the industry, because even as Christian publishers, right, we have to be business people within the industry. You need to know what a query is. You need to know what the guidelines are for submitting to either a literary agent or a publisher directly. You need to know how to pitch your idea and what the opportunities are that come with that. And then you need to know that if you sign a contract, one, what's in the contract, but two, what happens after. A lot of people say, oh, I got my contract. This is great. And then they just kind of go, well, what are you going to do for me? Let's go. And there's so much more nowadays that you have to do. As a writer, you have to have a platform. You have to have a voice in your industry. If you're writing, let's say, to moms about raising kids from pre-K to 6 years old and how to help them, with their Bible verses and how to help them, you need to know how to do that, and then find ways to network with people. And there's trade shows and conferences. There's all these ways for you to learn. And you don't even have to travel for them. Like, I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I can't tell you how many conferences come through the Dallas-Fort Worth area just about writing in general. And so find ways to learn. As a teacher, that's my biggest thing, is I don't stop learning. Even as an owner of a business, I'm constantly learning. If I wasn't, we wouldn't be where we are. So I think that as a writer, you have to do the same thing. And we all have a book in us. I totally believe that. But I think God has to call it out of you. And so even if it's maybe just write your story down for your kids, that's great. But, work on it. Make it the best it can be. And then you never know what could happen. God may call it out of you 3 years later and say, okay, I want you to submit it to so-and-so. And you might be thinking, I just wrote this for my kids. I just wanted them to have this when they grow up. But again, you never know. So whether you have smaller ambitions or bigger ambitions, You need to learn it because the industry is in flux, and it helps. It helps you to be able to prepare yourself for that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I love everything you're sharing. And I think it's kind of just a general, it's general business advice for any of us in any,
Right.
whatever field we're in, right? Like if you want to be good at XYZ, go learn about that industry of XYZ. And like, kind of like what you did before you launched this business, you took some classes, you did some research, you took action, but you didn't just jump out and say, I'm doing this thing and have no idea what was actually going to be involved. We
And
never know the whole path.
Right. There's something to say for that too. I mean, there are every now and then overnight success stories, and that's great. But I believe that even in those situations, God's called that person.
Yeah.
If they're a faith believer and what they're doing is to lead people back to Christ, then God's called them for it. And I'm a firm believer, and I struggle with this. So this is not me saying, oh, I'm perfect at this, because this is a daily struggle. But there's a quote that says, don't judge your start to someone else's middle or end.
Yeah.
Like, this is like not, where I am at 4 years, someone else is just starting. Or there's people who are 4 years ahead of me, or even 1 year ahead of me, who are doing way different things really well. And so I just look at that, and I have to remind myself that where I am is not where I was 4 years ago. And it's not where I'm going to be 4 years from now. But God's called me to this now. So even in the challenges and struggles, I constantly have to say, okay, Lord, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to learn? Who am I supposed to meet? How am I supposed to take this next step? But we have to, even in those overnight successes, you have to say, where were they like even a week ago that brought them to this place? Yeah. I tell our authors all the time, the moment that you put that pen to that contract, you need a prayer team. The moment you do that, because the moment that we as children's publishers decide we're writing books for kids for Christ, you become a target. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be prepared to walk that faith out, and then have a prayer team around you to support you. And I think even in those people who seem like the overnight win-win, they still have to have that too. They still have to walk their journey. So it's an interesting thing that we can say we own a business, and how are we going to impact people with that business? And then how do we, whether it's books, or you own a retail shop, or you open a dentist's office, whatever it is, to have that support around you, but then to know it, you have to learn because everything changes. I mean, even if you're a dental hygienist, the techniques that you use are different, right? There's everything that we did 20 years ago is not the same as what we're doing now. So everything's a little different. So
Yeah. I love that advice of having, being willing to learn, constantly growing and changing, but also just trusting God that He's placed you where you are, and then asking people to pray for you, asking for that support around you, because that is so valuable. So we talked a little bit about the idea of publishing a book and all of that, but what about just for the woman who is maybe just sensing God leading her to step out of her comfort zone, to do something different? I don't know if you experienced this, but I have experienced this where sometimes I'm not even sure if it's God calling me to that. Do you have any thoughts on that and how she might be able to determine her next steps?
I think you plug into your church. If you don't have a church home, it's okay to go check out churches and find a group that fits. But I can even say today I went this morning to a Christian women's business networking meeting that I'd never been to before. I just learned about it. And I sat there and absorbed everything like a sponge. And I think that when you're not even sure what you're being called to, or you're not sure it's God, sometimes we question just our minds, like, this is just me. And I'm just thinking this. And so I shouldn't do anything about it. There's a checks and balance that God has put in us. Is it in the scriptures? Because everything He says in the scriptures is going to be positive for you. If God says that you're called to this and you go to the scriptures, then you can have that confidence that he's working out everything for your good. The Bible says that. I'm working this out, right? And then in Jeremiah, the popular verse of, I'm calling you, I have a purpose and a plan for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously, if he has a purpose and a plan for you, then he's not just going to lead you on. There's a reason for it. So once you've done that and you go to a church group and plug into a women's ministry or men's ministry or however that works out, in terms of kids ministry, it could be kids ministry that you want to be participating in.
Yeah.
And listen and absorb, and then do your due diligence, go through and check what you're hearing. And does this pan out? And do your research on the business. Maybe you want to start your own jewelry making business. Okay, wonderful. Instead of just throwing yourself into the fire, try it out. We hear this a lot. I made some jewelry for myself and I started wearing it, and so liked it. So I made a pair for her. And the next thing you know, you've got this full blown business and you're doing trade shows at craft fairs and, all that stuff. So I think sometimes we question who we are, but God gives us discernment and wisdom. We just have to be willing to listen to it. When I started this, people in my regular circle were like, there was a group that said, well, that's totally a Rachel thing to do. And then there were those that were like, well, how are you going to do that? I mean, we had dinner, I think we made the decision to start the company. And about a month before, we met with some friends of ours after church one day for dinner. And I got bombarded with questions. And it was like, well, why do you think this is going to work? And I remember thinking in that moment, why do I think this is going to work? And being able to express that with thoughtful conversation. But it pushed me to say in my heart, if I don't do this, I don't know what else I'll be doing. Like, I don't know what else I want to do. But this takes up my every waking hour. And the Bible says in John that, our children are our future and he wants them to be brought to him. And that for me, that was confirmation. I'm doing this to lead more kids to Christ and to inspire their faith. So I think it's very easy to question ourselves. But I also think that if we pray and ask God for discernment and we pray and ask God for wisdom, he'll shut the door. If you're not supposed to be there, you may not like it when the door shuts. Let me tell you, we've had a few of those, but he'll shut it.
Yeah.
And then you have to be like that person that says, okay, God, I get it. There's something there I'm not supposed to do. And then he's going to point you where you need to go. I love doors. I don't know about you, but like on Pinterest, I have a whole folder, just doors, colorful doors, different shaped doors. And for some reason that just has always been something that speaks to me. And I just think of it all the time. I tell people all the time, God kept opening door. I kept saying, Lord, if this is not supposed to happen, shut the door. Like just shut it in my face, shut the door. And he didn't. And there are days I kind of wish he did, because then I wouldn't have, some of the roller coaster ride that I had to go on. But he kept opening doors and kept meeting people and he kept introducing me to things. And I think we have to have confidence. And I do have to say on that note, as women, we question our confidence often. And whether that's because we see everybody else doing things, especially with social media, and we think, oh, I can never be that person, or they're so far ahead of me. But we as women and moms and entrepreneurs and leaders, we need to have that confidence. We need to step out in confidence, not arrogance, because there is a difference.
Yeah.
But we need to step out in confidence that what God means for us, nothing is going to change that. He knows exactly where he wants us to be. So sorry, I think I just preached a sermon.
I love it.
Go. Hallelujah. Amen.
I just love, God brings these conversations around. And before we started recording, I told you, I'm not really going to ask you the questions that I sent you. So sorry.
I was all prepared, Esther. Yeah. I was all prepared. So.
But our tagline for the podcast is embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.
Right.
And so I just love that you brought that back. So what are some ways that you have developed confidence, or that you've been able to hold on to confidence in this journey of stepping out and doing this thing?
Oh, that's a challenging question. I can't say that I don't struggle with it. I mean, it really can be a day-to-day or week-to-week struggle. There are days that I'll have a meeting with a distributor or somebody who's been in the business for 20 years. And I shrink. I don't know about anybody else. I'm a short person anyway. So I'm like 5'2". And I'll be talking with them, whether on the phone or a video or in person. And they'll start talking like they know everything. And I remember thinking during one particular call, I questioned everything I was doing because they were experts and they knew it. And it was hard. There have been challenges, there's been days where I thought, okay, week to week, I'm going to do this. And really, we say these sayings like, do we just flippant, but they really have meaning. I took the next right step. One of my mantras, my personal mantras, is Hebrews 11:1. But the second one is just take the next right step, because I don't have all the answers. I cannot be a genius. I'm not. I don't have that IQ level, I don't think. But God has given me a brain in my head. He's given me a discernment in my heart, and I'm willing to learn. So the challenges that I face daily in my confidence is I actually do know what I'm doing. And it's okay that I don't have 20, 30 years of experience. The industry has changed so much that what was working then is not necessarily working now. So for my industry, sometimes being new is a good thing. But I think for me as a woman, am I juggling everything? Am I being a good mom? Am I being a good wife? Am I being a good leader? And so I've had to lean into my devotions. My family is a huge priority. We're Italian. And so we have this big extended family, but then we have our nucleus family. And I lean on my parents to this day. I ask them for, their advice and their prayers. But in confidence, I can't say I ever suffered from a lack of confidence, but I can have my confidence shaken. And so I struggle some with, am I doing this right? Am I being fair? Am I walking out what I'm talking? That's a big one. You want to be able to tell an author, this is da 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 da. And so I need to walk that same walk. And I don't know. I think we all have those moments where we feel the most confident. God's calling me into a season that I have kind of wanted, it's been my big picture as I built this company, but he's calling me into a new season within the company. And I've kind of been going, here's the breaks. I don't know if I'm ready for this yet, but I'm taking the next right step. I'm doing the next right thing. And it isn't without questioning. I don't know about you when you started your podcast, particularly as far as the starting part, but I question God and I go, okay, it's not that I don't have faith, but are you sure this is really, me? Are you choosing me? And is this really what you want me to do? And I have these conversations, especially in the car. I'll be driving to go pick up my daughter and I'm like, okay, you and I need to have a talk. Hello, Jesus, let's have this, And I think that's also the confident part is I'm confident in who he made me to be. So I can ask him, what exactly are we doing? What is it that you think we're doing? And then can you write it somewhere for me? Can we have this talk? And so for me, that's the biggest part. I don't know what I'd do without my faith. I really don't. I don't know how that works for some people because I've been through so many things, especially in the last 10 years, especially with the loss of the pregnancy. I don't know how to walk that without faith. I don't know where my confidence would be if it wasn't in Jesus. So I think that makes it a little bit better, but that's not to be cocky. That's just to say, even in those low moments, I know I have him, if nothing else, that's who I have. So,
yeah. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, a couple of things that you shared, in terms of the questioning, we question ourselves, we second guess ourselves. And I think it was episode 10, Holly and I actually talked about the idea of finding your purpose. And that's a big conversation in the Christian space. But a lot of times we overcomplicate it. And it's if you're not doing something that is against God's word, and you're doing something that your family's on board with, you're excited about, unless God's shutting that door, it's very likely something that's going to be a good thing, So, and then in terms of the confidence, I always come back to this issue of trust. It ultimately comes back to who am I placing my trust in? And if my trust is in anything else other than God, my confidence is going to be shaken. Because when I put my trust in myself, it's not going to work out.
You get a lot more gray hair. You know what? I have a few strands. They remind me daily that I need to work on. Trust is because you're trusting. For a lot of people, the struggle is I'm trusting an unknown thing, and I always have to remind myself, no, he is known. He's in his words. He's in the Bible. He's in your relationship with him, because it is a relationship. And as we all know, like if you use marriage as an example, relationships in marriage are not easy. They're complicated, and nobody's going to get it right every day. And so I do too. I struggle sometimes with trusting that voice that he's given me. And is it strong enough? Is it the right thing? And I think it's very easy to get bogged down. I think emotionally, maybe as a woman, I don't know. But for me, I get emotional about things. I'm a total INFJ. So like, woo, I'm the feeler. I have the feelings. And so I have to remind myself they're just my feelings. And in that moment, they're strong and they're very powerful, but that doesn't mean that they're right. And so, it's looking in the mirror and saying, it's okay. Today I'm going to trust. I don't know what what the outcome will be, but I'm going to trust that this is the next right thing. And he has it. He's our safety net. He's the one that's going to, even if this tomorrow, and I have prayed this prayer, Lord, even if tomorrow you shut the door on this whole thing, that will be hard and I would be devastated. But obviously you have a plan. So just show me what the next right thing is. Yeah. So it's a journey. It's a faith walk. We all have a faith walk, like literally we're walking that out step by step. So leadership is not for the faint of heart. Motherhood is not for the faint of heart. Owning a business is not for the faint of heart. So you do want to make sure you can be strong in what you believe, because we had our first troll. I say this all the time. We had our first troll this year, and it was tough, man. It was tough to have somebody really come at you. And I just thought, okay, Lord, I'm gonna help me, Jesus. So you learn really quickly what you stand for when you're confronted. So.
Yeah, so true. So true. I love all these things that you've just shared, Rachel. And I feel like we could keep going for a long time, but
we're running out of time.
So I'd love just to ask you if there's anything that I didn't ask you, because obviously I switched up some of the questions. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you feel like you would like to share with our listeners?
Read to your children. That's kind of self-serving, but kids. No, I'm a big literacy person. And I think one of your questions had to do with passion. And I remember sitting there and I was like, what is my passion? And I love a lot of things. I love to travel and I love photography and those are personal things. But I think that, and even I have to do this, and we've been doing it. Like sometimes you have to give yourself a kick in the pants and say, okay, if I'm going to talk about this, I should be doing this. We read to our daughter from the time she was born all the way up, and she's now 8. And I realized over the summer that I had somehow stopped, and I don't know why. Maybe because she's learned to read, and so she's reading more. But I realized that I missed that time with her right before bed when we would read. And I don't think she would be the reader she is now if we hadn't done what we did. But you can always start fresh. So even though I felt bad and I thought, oh, I messed up, I need to go back and do this, we've started reading. And it's not every night. Nobody has time all the time. So, but 2 or 3 times a week, I will pick out a little book that we have on the shelf. And usually it's a Bible story, or sometimes it's just like a quiet book, or what I call quiet books. There's not a lot of, it's not like big and active, but we've been reading more. And that connection with your child, to be able to sit for, as hard as it is, to sit for 5 or 10 minutes and just let your brain kind of go away, and you read with the voices and the words, and you're not, there's so much about that is important. You're connecting with your child without a phone or a tablet or any of those. You're connecting over a story, and you're reading a book with them that will leave an impact that maybe 15, 20 years down the road that they're like, oh, I remember when my mom and dad sat with me and read. But you're also teaching them to read, and you're teaching them to sound out words and all of that literacy thing. Yeah. Those things are important. But even as they get older, you can find books you can read together. We have a YA novel that's for boys and girls. And we've had adults who are reading it with their kids, and they'll email us and go, "Oh my gosh, when's the next book coming out? I'm so excited. This is so good." And that's so good, because then your kids are also seeing you model for them what your expectation is of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if there's anything that I can talk about that is just for us, it's about, read to your kid, take the time to read to your kids and find books that are good. We have lots of them. So you should come check us out at littlelambooks.com. But, find a book that you guys have in common. It could be about anything. It could be about soccer, or it could be about gymnastics, or it could be about planting a garden, or whatever it is. But I think that's probably the one question I would say is I was way prepared for on that one. Really, we need to read to our kids because we can't just leave it to the schools, and we can't just leave it to other people. We really need to make that a priority. Our kids need it. And they learn from our expressions. They, not just the stories, but they learn from us. And that's so powerful. It's so powerful for their lives. So you can even read a chapter in the Bible. If your goal is to read the Bible, the whole year through, start in the New Testament. It's way more entertaining at first for a kid, but
it's a little less heavy.
A little less heavy, a little less chopping off of heads. Well, sort of. There's a few moments, but anyway, I digress. But read with your kids because it's such a powerful thing.
Yeah, and I know some of our listeners may not have their own kids. We have some women that are single or don't have kids.
Yeah.
I think that all of us though have children in our lives. In some way or another, most likely.
You can go volunteer. I'll tell you this, there are schools who are looking for volunteers to be a guest reader, or what they call a celebrity reader. And you don't have to be a celebrity, but you will be to them. But there are schools who are looking for that. And I mean, you have to do all the normal background checks and volunteer paperwork and all that. But maybe for you, or going to a hospital and reading in their reading room or their playroom, and having everybody come in that can come in and read. And I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, because I don't have kids, I should. You can. My aunt did it. Bless her heart. She'll be like, talked about me. But she retired, and she started subbing at one of her local schools, and she's focused on literacy. And I think we all have ways that we can, whether you're a grandparent and, with your grandkids, or your nieces and nephews, or cousins, or your best friend's children, or however that works out, we all have something we can do about that. I mean, and there's people are craving volunteers who will go out and do those things. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what I always end with is actually talking about the fact that leaders are learners. So it's awesome that we've just been talking about reading, because that's a huge way to learn. So I would love to know, is there something that you have been learning lately that you would like to share? And it could be a book you've read, or it could be just a lesson you learned, or a podcast you've listened to that you think might interest our listeners.
I'm late to the Enneagram phase. That big thing. I'm late to that. I'm a late bloomer. It's just the way it works. But I got into Rachel Cruz's podcast, and I know Annie Downs did one as well. And I listen to a lot of podcasts when I walk, or in my office. But I really kind of got into that. I love all of those kinds of things. But it's been a long time since I took the Myers-Briggs. I haven't done a test in a while. But I kept hearing about these numbers, and I kept thinking, wow, what in the world is this? And she had a really big, series on her podcast with some speakers that were talking about it. And she did a whole thing about each number. And of course, all of her stuff was geared more toward how you handle money. But I still learned what it was. And then I went and took a test, and I was like, that's interesting. So for me, the most recent thing I have had time to do over summer was to figure out what that was. And then I encouraged our authors to go do it. And some had done it, and a lot of them hadn't. And I thought, well, see, I'm not the only one who has just started this. Yes. But I think it's interesting. It's interesting to learn more about yourselves. I think the more we can be aware of who God created us to be, and they're not perfect. I mean, numbers are numbers. It's not that, but it's just oh, hey, yeah, I can walk in that. Oh, hey, yeah,
Mhm.
I have that ability. Oh, that's what that means.
Yeah.
And this is where even sometimes weaknesses where you can start. I didn't know what that whole weak side was,
Yeah.
but I learned really quickly what your wings are. And I mean, there's verbiage I had no idea about, but I was like,
Yes.
okay, sure, yeah, maybe that's me. So that's the most recent, but also I'll
Yeah.
tell you, Priscilla Shire, I listen to her a lot too. I love her. I love the way she speaks and I love
Mhm.
what she imparts to people. And I'm also a late comer to her book, The Armor of God.
Yeah.
And I've been pushing myself to do chapters at a slower pace and really read them. But just going through that scripture about the armor of God and what that means as a woman and how to wear that armor. And so that's been the most recent. And I don't do that every day. It's like almost a weekly thing. I just pick one chapter and
Mm.
that way I can meditate on it or think about it, or it challenges me regularly. So
Yeah.
those are the two most recent things. And like I said, I'm kind of late. People have probably already had some of that, but I think sometimes it's good I just take my time.
Mhm.
I have so many things to juggle. So I just take my
Yes.
time when I find something that I like. I'm like, oh, I need to really kind of learn that. So that's a lesson for
Awesome.
me. So.
Well, I know Holly, my co-host, is currently doing the Bible study, The Armor of God, and she has been
Oh,
raving about
good.
it. And I've never done it, so I think that's got to be on my list. So as we wrap up, Rachel, can you
Mhm.
share with everyone what's the best way for people to connect with you to learn more about you and your business?
Well, that's a really fun answer. They can find me with Little Lamb Books anywhere. We're on Facebook, and you just type in Little Lamb Books, and we're purple. So if you find the purple logo with the lamb, that's us. But we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest. So you name it, we're
Okay.
there. But I'm excited because at the end of this month, I'm actually launching my own website. And so it's rachelpellegrino.com. And for those who need help, Pellegrino spelled like the water.
Awesome. And we'll
And
put the
so it's
link right in the notes
yeah,
too.
yeah. So we're launching rachelpellegrino.com, and I'm going to be offering coaching opportunities for people who are wanting writerly type help, but also maybe just they want to ask questions or
Mm,
learn more about what we do. And so I'm excited about that. And I have my own personal, for that, I have a Facebook page and I have Instagram and Twitter. And so you just kind of have to search for my name and my big hair.
yes.
So I have big
Okay.
hair, big curly hair, lots of it, and it's big and curly, and so you'll see me. But if you find Little England Books, we'll have links to all of
Okay.
that for
Okay,
everybody.
perfect. And probably when this episode goes live, that site will probably be live. So we'll make sure to have things
Yes,
linked up.
yes,
So just go to the show notes for this episode and you can click over to find more about Rachel and Little Lamb Books. So thanks so much for joining us today, Rachel. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. Do you want to become a more confident leader? Then make sure to grab the Confident Leader Manifesto. This is a resource that Holly and I developed just for you, and I share all about it in episode 6, Leading with Confidence. You can get the manifesto for yourself at estherlittlefield.com/confident, and that's confident with a T. Now don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.